introduce you both. So thank you both for being here today. We have with us, let me mute someone. We have Tom Gross and Dan Reem with us, and they have a podcast that these gents do that is actually how I track them down. They're elementary teachers, and their podcast is called Teachers in the Dungeon. Dan has taught social studies and even admits to a little bit of French for the last 30 years in public schools up in Illinois. He serves as the social studies chair at Washington Community High School. And I've already mentioned about their podcast, but I'll say it again. There you have a podcast called Teachers in the Dungeon. And if you are all driving or commuting, it's definitely worth throwing on. Tom Gross has been a school librarian for 13 years, so he gets us. Before that, he taught speech and English for 10 years, and he sponsored game clubs at different schools. So both these gentlemen are highly invested in bringing games and integrating them into learning opportunities. And so we're fortunate that both of them are here to share with us how we can steal what they've done and integrate it with kudos to them into our library programming. And we're just so appreciative to have their knowledge and wisdom and experience so we can learn from them actually literally and figuratively. So thank you both, Tom and Dan, for being here. And we look forward to learning from you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. We're happy to be here. This is, I don't know about you, Dan, this is a new experience for me.
Yeah.
So this is really cool for us. All right, well, to get things started, I wanted to start by saying today we want to share with you our D&D camp model. We're going to talk about teenagers and where they are and share ideas of how to reach them. As we work with teenagers, we've got, well, I have teenagers at home. You've had teenagers at home. I'm sure many of you do, but we're going to talk about where we can find them and how to reach them. We're going to discuss building a gaming community and how our D&D camp concept is built around that gaming community. Then our plan is to share the model for our camp and the thinking behind the structure. And then we'll offer ideas along the way of how you might want to modify that for your situation. So, as Amy said, I am Tom Gross, and I've been in education for 23 years. 13 of those as a school librarian. I've been everything from a kindergarten through 12 librarian here at Washington High School. It's a 9-12, and I do several extracurriculars with the kids. I run a book club. I can't be a librarian without a book club, right? And then I have the game club that I run. I'm a speech coach for our school, competitive speaking, and that might be it. At least it's really relevant. And then my gaming experience is that I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, since 1980. I played every edition of Dungeons and Dragons except 4th edition, which is when I went over to Pathfinder. So that's my nerd talk for here. Dan.
Amy already introduced me, so I'll just add my gaming experience. I've been helping Tom with Game Club for about 3 years and playing Dungeons and Dragons for about 5. I had one session of D&D when I was about 12, and then my Baptist mother took it away from me, and I didn't get to play again until I was an adult. So anyway, I've been helping with Game Club and summer camp, things like that.
Okay. So we're going to jump right into it and talk about a difficult audience to reach, which are teenagers. And so our experience, by the way, I ran this slide by several teenagers, and I said, let me just make sure I'm getting this right based on my experience and research. Do we have this right? And all the teenagers were like, yeah, this is pretty spot on. So I feel pretty comfortable that we've got this right. So when students are online, they are social media instant influencer wannabes, and they're kids creating content. But then there are also the kids that consume online content through Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube. A vast majority, if not, dare I say, all students get their information for news, shopping, society, trends, all from the internet. And so that is probably the majority of where a lot of them spend their time. A lot of teenagers are homebodies, and a lot of these students are online and console gamers who find joy in playing games, but their outlet is playing online with others. They communicate through means of like Discord or other such services to talk with other gamers in real time. Then, since we're talking about gamers, the next section, the next level of it is at the game stores. They're hanging out there, they are playing games, they're researching games, they're buying the materials there. And what we've learned is that students want to be at a table playing with each other, playing games that way. And so, yeah, they might be on TikTok, they might be playing games online, but they would prefer to be face-to-face playing games. And then the last place you'll find students is where they are captive audience, and that is at a school. So we're going to talk about how to reach out to those schools and find the students there.
So there's plenty of games you can choose to draw kids in. As Tom said, the face-to-face aspect, I think, makes the difference. It might be sort of leverage to make playing games at the library desirable. And D&D has got a few things going for it that I think set it above some other board games. With the role play involved and the building a character and seeing that character through adventures, there's an emotional connection that happens. And we can both attest to that as watching students and as playing D&D ourselves, that it draws you in and you want to come back. So if you can get a successful D&D game running at the library, that is going to be, I don't want to say a captive audience, but definitely a dedicated one. And it really is the perfect time, I think, to be looking at something like this. D&D has really been in the zeitgeist for a while now. Stranger Things, obviously, at Netflix is built around concepts from D&D. You've got Critical Role. There's all kinds of online playthrough sessions that people watch. There's all kinds of celebrities, everybody from Stephen Colbert to Dwayne Johnson, that not only admits playing D&D, but are proud of it. Plenty of, it's definitely resonating right now. In addition, another thing that just to consider is D&D also offers a lot of adjacent hobbies. You can find all kinds of hobbyists, and even people making careers out of writing content for Dungeons and Dragons, building terrain, making dice. There's just a wide range of things that you can put together to draw people in. So that's one of the reasons why we think this could be so successful for us and for you as well.
Right. And so when we talk about creating a gaming community with teens, some general principles that we have sort of assembled in building our community. And so the first principle is starting small and not worry about starting small. If you get 3 students or 3 kids or adults to show up to play a game, that's a huge success.
And that's enough.
And that is enough. And you may not be ready for more than that. And so that's okay too. And then the next key then is, after starting small, is keep plugging away. Keep inviting those 3 patrons in to play games. And before you know it, they'll start asking questions like, hey, my buddy would really like to come, or I know somebody else who plays Dungeons and Dragons, would you mind if they come? And that is how it will start to build. Another general principle is discover your community of resources. Who is out there in your community? Do you have patrons that come to the library that have played Dungeons and Dragons for a long time, but you just never knew it? And so you might find some of those folks. You might also have people in the community who are wanting to help out in some way. They may be great gamers, and they may just be interested in gaming, or at least just helping out. And then building your own resources is something else that I've found that has been a really strong general principle. You want to show the people you're asking to come and play that you are committed as well. And so have things there that show that have the rule books. Bring in novels that are those fantasy novels of like Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or something like that. And I know you have a story that you were going to share about.
A quick little anecdote. We have a friend of ours who we met through a podcast who lives in New Jersey, who just a week ago messaged us so excited because his local library just announced they were starting up a Dungeons and Dragons game night. And he was so excited. He has worked forever to get his family into the game, and he's always had to be the dungeon master, the guy who runs the game, and he was delighted to be able to actually get to be a player. So there are people like that everywhere. You just never know. So
Right.
that was kind of serendipitous that he chose to let me see that message right before we got to speak here.
Absolutely. I didn't know he's from New Jersey. That's
Mhm.
cool.
Now you do.
So this is our story. We wanted to, like, as I mentioned in the opening, we want to share our story with you. So this is it. And take what you want from it. Take the entire model, switch it, make it yours, add or subtract things to fit your budget, stretch your thinking, be willing to go beyond your current boundaries. This is where it gets kind of tough, is stretching your thinking, going beyond current boundaries. Make yourself a little uncomfortable. When you invite gamers to come into the library, it can feel a little uncomfortable at the start. And once you discover that they're there for community, it really becomes kind of cool. Collaborate with new entities in your community to build this community and have some fun. So we don't know exactly where you're coming from, but we do feel and are pretty confident that you have teams in your communities that want to make connections. These teams want to make new friends. They want to play games and have fun. We want to help them and you achieve these goals, but we also want them to learn, grow, and build community themselves and teach them how to do that. And this is where Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games come into play. There is some upfront work that has to be done. It's part of the, going beyond your boundaries and feeling a little uncomfortable. And it can be done while getting your small start. So you've got the 3 students there, or the 5 students there, and okay, you're like, okay, I can't take any more than this. Be comfortable and just letting that be. So this is our story that includes a model we created to build our community. Feel free to put questions into the queue, and we will answer those as they come up or as we see them. Or Amy, feel free to jump in and let us know when there's some questions in there.
Already one comment of a librarian where they've got a year-long waiting list for Dungeons and Dragons. So we're dealing with a varsity here. Okay, awesome.
All right, so when we talk about community, it all started with our game club at our school. And the 2 things I want to point out on here. Number 1 is our active membership. We started in 2014. We started small, as I've been advocating as a general principal. We started with 16 kids, and we didn't play Dungeons and Dragons at the time. It was just board games, and it wavered around that area for 2 or 3 years, and then we introduced Dungeons and Dragons, and it started to quickly ramp up. Now, here's the cool thing about a community like this: the pandemic came, did not dent the membership of our game club at all. We played games online. Not as frequently, but then when we came back, we had students that were remote, we had students that were in the school. We ran both games. And so that community stayed strong. I wanted to mention the other is Dungeons and Dragons. It's one of our weekly activities. You get to a point, as you mentioned, you have 100 people on the waiting list. I'm guessing probably your limit, besides space, is having people to run those games. We were running into that problem. And so that's where the idea of the camp came from, because we wanted to teach kids how to be better players, but kind of secretly, we also needed DMs. And so we're going to train kids to run the games themselves.
So we can kind of run by this slide real quick, make sure we kind of stay on schedule, but we're just going to take you through the process that we used to create the summer camp. We wanted to create DMs. We also wanted to give a more immersive experience for the kids. And because we're educators, we wanted to also spend some time teaching the kids about the game. And a summer camp seemed like a fun and effective way to do that. To get started, we did want you, just to give you a little bit of a taste of what our summer camp was like this year. We did put together a little, I don't know if you want to call it a promotional video, just a highlight video. So Amy, I don't know if it works to play that now. We'll see. I don't think we have control of it from this side.
It does, except I didn't see the link because I was at the funeral. So I missed that you guys had a promotional or you had a video. I'm sorry, but yes, I can flag it through if you want to send it to me, or I can track it down if you want to keep talking. I'll grab it. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay, no, that's no problem. We can move on and just let us know when you've got it ready.
Okay.
Yeah, we can jump into that. So we're going to start by talking about our players. And when we talk about the players, that's who's going to participate in the camp. So the first question that I think you ask yourself is, what is your goal? Because this will help you determine who it is that you're trying to reach. Is it adults? Is it teens? Is it tweens? Our goal was to develop teams to become better players, but more importantly, create DMs to run the game. Do you have it all set?
No, I don't know where you sent me the link. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, it's all right. It was just in the same email with our presentation. But
okay, let me go back and get it. I believe my colleague put it in, so I just need to you guys keep going. Let me get it.
No worries. No worries at all. Okay, so as educators, we want students to lead each other and build those skills. Your goal may be different. As I mentioned, you may want to teach or recruit adults and have a camp for adults to ask them to play, but also to DM. You may want to target teams for the same reason we do, to become better players and to also support your community by being dungeon masters or leaders. If you want to create that ongoing, long-term relationship with community, you might want to start with tweens and even late elementary students. When they become part of the community, you get that longevity of having some students around for quite some time. And what's nice about all three of those categories is the dynamics that can come from having an adult teaching and leading a group of teens. Or maybe you'll have a team that's willing to run a group of adults. I think that would be super cool. And and then you have just all sorts of different combinations of people running games.
So our model, we decided to run a full day camp from 9 to 3. We knew that required providing lunch for them, so we decided to take that on. And our goal, as we mentioned, was to provide some education about the game as well as extended opportunities to play the game. So we broke down extended, in fact, I'll just go ahead and switch now and show you just sort of a sample daily schedule of how we ran things. We broke our morning session into 2 or 3 sessions, depending on the day. Students had a little bit of choice. We actually ran 2 tracks. This is the second year we've done this camp, so we have returning students. So we had some students that were in a track to become dungeon masters or improve their skills, and then the remainder of the students were in a player track. So we might have a session for our dungeon masters to learn how to set up a really awesome combat encounter. But at the same time, our players were learning, here's the best strategies to survive a combat encounter. And then we made time after that for sort of a mini session where our players could be, our dungeon masters could set up an encounter, and then we just kind of randomly draft players in, and both sides would have a chance to sort of play at what they had just learned. We also wanted to teach kids about, again, some of the hobbies connected to that. So there was a local dice maker we invited in to show the kids what she does. We brought in some third-party creators of materials for students to interact with and experience. And then our afternoons were for playtime. Oh, looks like we've got our, so this is a little bit of a view of
D&D Summer Camp.
Okay.
D&D Summer Camp. D&D Summer Camp. D&D Summer Camp. Time to slay some monsters, we'll be famous in this land. Grab the cleric and the rogue, there's no time left to plan. Don't split the party, cause that's how people die. Roll lots of crits now, and make our DM cry. D&D Summer Camp. D&D Summer Camp. D&D Summer Camp. D&D Summer Camp. Paladins and fighters soak up damage like us runs. Our wizards got a fireball harder than the freaking sun. We are heroes, and we create that sweet XP. Roll out your crits now, and embrace your destiny.
All right. I forgot to mention we had a local grad Cameron Johnson, who is is sort of an up-and-comer in the comic book industry, and he was gracious enough to give us some time and teach kids how to draw. So that was an extra benefit we had.
Yes, yes. So that's the model. And one thing, Dan, you mentioned was it's a full day, 9 to 3 o'clock. We did 4 days of the camp in addition to that. And when you think about it, these are high school students, and our camp is in the summer, in July. And we ask kids to come to the school for a full school day in the middle of July, and we get perfect attendance. Not a single student missed coming to school in the summer. So that's the power of this game. So when we move from the model and the players to now the place. And so some things that we considered and that you may want to do as well is, what spaces do you have in your library to be able to host some type of a camp like this? You know, you have meeting rooms, you have an upstairs, a downstairs, a loft, conference rooms, things like that. I look at what are the meetings, what meets the needs of all of your patrons. I learned a lesson working with our local public library in a community event that's not this, but it's a community event, and I was collaborating with them to use our space and their space at the same time. And I would say, well, oh, you could do this at your space. And they're like, actually, we can't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, how about this? You could do this. And they're like, we can't do that either. And I'm like, wow, nothing's working. And what I didn't consider as being a school librarian is you have all populations that come and use the library. And so it can be disruptive slightly, depending on the space you have. So take that into consideration as well. What are some other spaces if your library is small or the spaces are not really good for your whole patron list? You could look at community buildings or schools, collaborate with them, or a church or a local game store, something like that. But things that we considered were the size of the venue. What space did we need? You want to have smaller spaces for games that are potentially adjacent. We used, as you saw in the video, we went classroom to classroom. And we have an upstairs area that is pretty self-contained. It has 4 classrooms that are quite large. There's a bathroom up there, which is especially nice. And so we had a large meeting space, and then we broke the games out around in the classrooms, and it worked beautifully. So we keep our fingers crossed that we'll always have access to that part of the building, but there's always summer work that happens, and someday we will get removed from that place.
We kind of made a virtue out of necessity. We had to have 2 different games in each classroom, which can get a little bit noisy. But if you've been to a gaming convention, they'll put 20 tables of games in the same area, and there's something about the energy of that can actually be pretty enticing. So right. You can tell yourself you're giving the kids the con experience if you have to put games together.
Right.
So a lot of heard a few comments that there are some people who do already know quite a bit about Dungeons and Dragons. So if you are still fairly new to it, you don't need much to get started. Really, you need a couple of the core rule books. You need a few sets of dice that you can pick up at Amazon for a few bucks. Ideally, a table mat with 1-inch, like a 1-inch grid table mat, although you can just use wrapping paper at a pinch, because they've all got those grids on the back as well. And then something to write on that with. And you could have a Dungeons and Dragons club just with that. That would be enough to take care of things if you've got your dungeon master, someone to lead the game. Right. So rulebooks here you can see, they're familiar, I'm sure, to a lot of you. The Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual are really key. Dungeon Master's Guide is nice to have. I wouldn't say it's an absolute necessity. I don't get by without it. Maybe a published adventure to kind of help you understand how things run. Once you dive in, you will find that there's actually more materials there than you could ever use in a lifetime. Wizards of the Coast, that produces Dungeons and Dragons, has released the game itself and its core rules to Open Commons, and so anybody can produce third-party materials and sell them. So there's all kinds of materials out there to help get you started, to give you ideas for adventures. It's, your budget's really the only limit there.
Right, and and when we talked about earlier, getting them to buy in and you showing that you are there to support them in this venture of adventuring. There's other books that the library would benefit in having. There is a set of books called the Young Adventurers collection, or just Young Adventure Guides. And that series is great, especially reaches out to your teens and late elementary students to help them sort of acclimate themselves to what Dungeons and Dragons is all about. They're cute little hardback books that they're pretty short and very approachable for students. And I would venture that you would have adults checking those out as well. I think they're super cool to look through, but also the novels and making a display for your gamers with the Dragonlance novels or Eberron or Forgotten Realms and things like that, and promoting those. I was going to say, as far as like players' handbooks and such, in my library, I have 7 players' handbooks, which has always been plenty for my audience. A lot of the kids, they'll come and use them for a time or two, and then I notice that they have their own. And so if that's a possibility for your patrons, they might go that route. So just mentioning that. So talking about expenses, and yes, you do get access with D&D Beyond to have the basics to be able to play the game. That's a good point there. So speaking of expenses and budget, expenses are what you make of it and what you want your camp to be. We've talked about the materials that you need to have to be able to run the game. You might want to have food. A traditional Dungeons and Dragons game usually is around some sort of community food. And so Dan mentioned, we chose to make our camp a full day, and so we offered lunch in the middle. If our budget didn't allow for that, we did talk about just the kids brown bag it, and they bring their own lunches, and that would be perfectly fine. If you're doing a morning or afternoon session, a couple bags of popcorn in the microwave, put a bowl out there for people to share. I think that's plenty. Swag and prizes. In our first camp, we wanted to give something away and have the kids excited about that aspect. And so you see there in that picture on the left-hand side, we gave away 2 books. I don't even think we gave dice or anything away. We just gave away the 2 books. And the kids were super excited about it. And they stuck around for their drawing and everything. And then the second year, we through a lot of generous donations, we had tons of gifts to give away. We also had swag bags that we gave the kids that were very low expense to us because much of it was donated. We bought dice for the kids in their swag bag. Oh, first year we did have they got dice when they came. But, we went to Amazon and spent $20 to buy 30 sets of dice. It was very cost effective. And then if you do have some guests that come, if you bring in a local expert, or as Dan mentioned, we have our alumni Cameron Johnson, who's a comic artist and writer. He came in with us. I always feel that it's my policy that if I'm inviting someone into the school to do something like this, I just assume that I'm going to have to pay them. Not have to, but that I'm going to pay them. And I always ask, what is your charge for coming and visiting us? 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, there's no charge. Okay, unless there's some kind of travel or something. Most of them say no charge. But if you have someone notable, nationally notable, they're probably going to have some sort of an honorarium that you have to pay. And our artist, Cameron Johnson, did have that. So full disclosure on the budget side of things is that, and I talked to our public librarians here locally to ask them this question, we do charge the students a registration fee. We feel like that gives them a buy-in, and it makes it feel like they're getting something for the money that they've paid. So we charge $30 for students to do the 4 days. That includes the lunch, it includes their swag bag, it includes all the prizes and everything like that. But it's more importantly, for me, it's that they make that commitment that they're going to spend $30 to do it. In talking to my public librarians, they were like, no way could we do that, or would we want to do that? It's not their goal in their public library. So I understand that, but we did have that to help pad our budget. I do have a program budget, as probably many of you do, and so my program budget is my game club budget. And so we did some fundraising at basketball games and things like that, ran concession stands and things like that to try to build a budget for the camp, and it worked out really well. You could go to, potentially you could go to the community and look and see, maybe you've got patrons who would be willing to toss in some money for something like this. We reached out to our online community of the podcast and just said, hey, this is what we're doing. We're looking for just encouragement, but if you've got more than that, we would be open to that. And the other is grants and local businesses. There are grants out there for running games like this. I'm sure you guys know much more about those grants and the public library world than I do. But one place that we haven't really tapped into too much, we started to last year and we were just too late, is going to our local businesses. You know, you don't know that the local State Farm insurance agent, they may have played Dungeons and Dragons years ago, and they're looking for some way to give back to the community, and this might just sound like the perfect thing for them. And so this year, we have a letter that we sent out last year that didn't get much traction. We're going to start earlier this year and make those contacts and connections. We do have a few leads that we're going to follow with some local businesses, and so we'll see where we get with that. But if we had to go minimum, our program budget does cover that.
And even a fairly swanky summer camp, you're looking at just a few $100s, and you get half dozen people that chip in $50 for businesses, and you're there, really.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly small investment for them as well.
Right.
Kind of building on that, you're going to probably need some support just from other bodies. And if you're not aware of just the networking to be able to find the gaming community, if you have a game store within driving distance at all, get in touch with them, meet the owner, visit. They probably have a Dungeons and Dragons night. You can meet gamers there. It is a very warm and eager community. 90% of them, I would guess, would love nothing more than to be able to expand the game and draw new people in. So if you're looking for collaborators, people to help out, that's probably the first stop. Social media, obviously, as we all know, is also quite useful. There are all kinds of Facebook groups, local and regional, about Dungeons and Dragons. Instagram has a wonderful community surrounding Dungeons and Dragons, as well as the hobbies connected with that. And as Tom mentioned, I just kind of threw an all call out to these strangers out in the ether and said, we're running a camp, would you like to help? And we had people say, yes, I'm going to send you guys some dice. Where do I mail it to? So you will find in that community people who are excited to help and be part of something like this.
We gave a presentation at GenCon, that is a gaming convention in Indianapolis in August every year. We gave a similar presentation about our summer camp there, and it was an audience of public librarians, educators, and people in the industry, mostly store owners and things like that. And one thing we learned from those store owners in the Q&A session is they are eager to reach out to us, being educators and public librarians. They don't know how to make those connections. And they're like, we don't know where to go, we don't know what to say, things like that. Their biggest fear is that if and when they do reach out to the public libraries and schools, is that we sit there and say, give us. Mm-hmm. And we have to be very sensitive to just asking for things from them. Create that reciprocal relationship with those store owners. You know, they might give you a book or two, or they might give you some support in your camp that you run, or if you've got the game clubs running already, they might find a way to financially help you or give you books, materials, things like that, dice. But they would like to have some kind of reciprocation as well. They would love to have an audience with the people that you are inviting to the library. They might want some marketing, if that's possible. Have business cards available at those meetings that people can learn about their business and things like that. But they are excited to reach out and talk to us as public entities, because they know we have their players as our patrons, And so they would love to make that collaboration with you. And that's right from them. That's what they said in our session. We always suspected it, and that's always been our experience here locally in Central Illinois. But they confirmed that on a nationwide side, is they really want to reach out.
We just as our own experience with our summer camp, we do a short field trip to the local game store, and they set us all up with minis and paints, and we get a paint session. And again, this is sort of us learning about and leveraging the local resources we have. The image of the man on the right there on your screen is a internationally known miniature painter. He paints for when WizKids and things like when companies like that release new minis. A lot of times it's guys like him that get to paint them for the ads. So he's also invented his own line of paints. He's heavily into, as I said, making a career adjacent to D&D. So it was fun to be able to let our kids take a paint lesson from this guy. We just kind of stumbled across it, but he was right there in our community. So you never know who's out there that might be able to help you and make your camp really special.
Absolutely. And then collaborating with the community and the local schools. That's something that we know quite a bit about. We want to reach out and we want to work with you as public libraries, because you have some resources that we don't have. We have resources that maybe you don't have, like a captive audience of teenagers. And so, some of the best ways to reach out to your local schools, if you haven't done so, and if you have successfully reached out to your schools, go ahead and put those, like your techniques and the way in which you did that into the chat. It would be really helpful for everybody. But our recommendation would be go to our websites, go to your school's local website and look for clubs. See what clubs that school hosts. You might be surprised that they've got that game club already. Look for esports clubs. Those esports gamers are tabletop gamers too, many of them. If they don't have a game club, do they have a club that might be closely associated with games and having fun together? If that doesn't work and they don't have clubs posted on their website, then I'd start looking at teachers. We've found that English teachers, history teachers, and science teachers in our local, we have a teacher gaming group, a D&D, an ongoing game with our teachers that we've kind of grown beyond just the school, but a lot of us are English, history, and science teachers. However, 2 of them are math teachers, so don't pass up on the math teachers. So a way you might reach out there is see if you can identify who the department chair is, and send an email to that department chair. Tell them what your goal is. See if they have anybody in their department that might be able to make that connection for you. Things you might discover is, we've got the captive audience where we can promote for you. We can tell kids that, hey, the public library is starting a Dungeons and Dragons group or a gaming community. Why don't you guys go over and check it out? You never know. Teachers love to work with kids. We do. That's why we're here. And you might find a group of teachers that might be willing to come and volunteer to help at the public library. And you also discover that there's some teachers that are running RPGs in their classrooms that might have some unique skills and ways to bring people over to you.
Huh. We've got a priest as a DM.
Nice.
Perfect. Cleric.
Yes.
So just as a bit of advice, if you do set up a camp like this, you're running it, don't take too much on during the camp itself. Make sure that you've got folks in place to be able to run it. I think one of the most beneficial things for Tom and for me is on the days of the camp, we might run some sessions in the morning, but the afternoon when it's time for just extended D&D playtime, we are not the DMs. It gives us an opportunity to sort of circulate, see what's going on, keep tabs on everything, but also to reflect and to figure out, all right, what do we want to do next year? What really worked well? And so we found that to be quite useful. And so we just want to pass on that a bit of advice. It's kind of basic, but I think it bears saying. And we also got a lot of feedback from students. We had them do a written reflection at the end of the camp. And then what we did is we didn't really allow ourselves any rest time. we went right away with those reflections and read through them while everything was fresh in our minds to say, okay, what are we going to do different next year to improve it? And we found that to be useful.
Dan is the one that advocated that. I'm usually the one that's like, finally, the program's done, walk away for a while. But he did that, and it is a huge, huge benefit because those little details that you're like, oh, we should have done this a little differently, you'll forget those week, 2 weeks down the road. So that immediate is super helpful.
And so just very quickly, first year of our camp, we had 8 campers. So that's pretty small, but we liked that. It was good to sort of practice run at things. You can see we jumped to 27 last year, and that was amazing. It was so exciting, just the energy in the room of all those kids. And their feedback was positive. They really enjoyed, basically it was just more of everything. It's pretty much what they wanted.
Yeah.
So that was very nice to hear.
One of my favorite feedbacks was so Dan ran a terrain session in our first camp, and it was really popular, but for whatever reason, we made the decision to cut it and not use it in our second year.
We had other things we wanted to try.
Yeah.
And my thought was, that's just something I do on the side. That's what the experts.
A lot of our returners gave feedback saying, where was the terrain building? We want the terrain building back.
It'll be back.
So next year, we'll have terrain building.
We did have some interviews on another video, but we are running short of time. So we're just going to go ahead and skip to some of the quotes that we pulled from that. And Tom, your favorite, I mean, you did this slide, so.
Yeah. Go ahead and take a look at the quotes, but the one I want to point out is the one right there in the middle of the box. We asked the question, how likely are you to sign up for next year's camp? The student replied, I would already sign up. It's how you know you're doing something right. You know, but you look at the other ones. Another one I really like is the bottom left, is having not played D&D. Okay, we had a student that signed up. We had 2 students that signed up specifically because we had Cameron Johnson, the artist, coming. So he said, I expected everyone to know more than me. There were people who knew more than me, but they helped teach others and create such a great experience. I signed up for the artist. And that goes back to what Dan said about the gaming community I've never thought of it this way, but it is a warm community. They may not look super accepting, but they totally are, because they want people to play with. Yeah. And so they are more than willing to have you come.
And this is just a list of the donors that helped us out, and we won't go through all of them, but there were 3 local that we made contact with, but then 3 were just folks we met on Instagram who were willing to donate. And just so you know, every once in a while you do, I don't want to say hit the jackpot, that sounds kind of crass, but the icon in the upper right, we met them at a convention vendor hall, and long story short, they provided us with probably approaching $1,000 worth of materials for free, just because they loved what we did and they wanted to support kids. So you don't know what you're going to find until you ask, and I've learned that the hard way, because that's not really easy for me to do. But we make those connections, and there's people out there that will help.
And that goes to a point that I wanted to make, is the upper left, the Limitless Adventures, the upper right, Dan mentioned. These are companies that we encountered at conventions. I mentioned GenCon in Indianapolis. We go to GaryCon, that's in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and local conventions. That's where you get the face-to-face. It's extra time, you know, it takes time out of your personal schedule, but for the sake of the camp or your community, going to those places, talking to these vendors, telling them what you're doing. Most of them want to, in some way, fashion, whatever, they want to help you out. And so those conventions, I'm just going to tell you, that is an excellent use of time and money.
We are right up against where we're supposed to end. I apologize. Do we have any questions at this point? Anything you wanted to ask? We kind of lathered on. Apologize for that.
We're podcasters. We talk.
Well, we could do this too, is that if you do think of questions or ways that you think Dan and Tom might be able to help you, I can connect you with them, or their emails are right there too. I also, at the start,
we practice what we preach. We would love to, I mean, if you reach out, we would love to give you any kind of help we can if you want to set up any kind of gaming activity at your libraries with whatever advice we can provide or suggestions. we'd love to do that.
And they're not kidding. These guys have been ridiculously generous already with their time just in meeting before the conference. Just lots of great thoughts. And one thing I thought of too is they were talking about the interviews with students is you could take those, say you do this and you do interviews, you could take the interviews to the donors. And then you don't just have the stats behind things, but you have the stories. And that just brings everything to life, you know. So
we have a quick question here. Yeah, quick question here about ideal D&D size. Yes, I would say don't go above 6.
Right.
And hopefully a little less than that.
Yeah, I would say 3 to 5 is probably ideal. It also depends on the experience of your dungeon master. If they're an inexperienced dungeon master trying it for the first time, 3 or 4 players. If it's an experienced dungeon master, yeah, that 4 to 6 or 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, somewhere in that range. Would not go over 6.
And we're not here to shill, but some of our podcast episodes we do run through. We did podcast episodes of just daily recaps of each day of our summer camp. So if it is something you feel like doing a deep dive and learn a little bit more about, that information out there too.
Any other questions? I'm sure you do, but any other questions you want to bring up right now that they can answer versus contacting them? Well, people might be typing, so I'll just, in the interim, just thank you both. This was, as usual, it's a delight, but again, every time I talk with you, I learn more, and I just saw people just entranced. So thank you both so much for presenting to us, for taking the time to prepare and sharing just all that you've experienced so that we could learn from you. There's already accolades coming in thanking you, and I definitely say check out their podcast. It's worth the listen to, and you can go and subscribe to that as well. Just as yet another way you could stay in contact with that net of support that's out there for different RPG opportunities. So lots of information, and as you think of things, if you lose their emails, contact me and I'll connect you up again.
Thank you, and honestly, thanks for the opportunity. I don't know if we're sort of reticent Midwesterners, but we are very passionate about this. This is exciting. We love seeing the kids and what it does for them. So the more that we can know that we are helping spread that kind of opportunity everywhere for kids to experience this game, we're excited to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thank you both again.
Okay.
And actually, I'm going to put this in we also, I didn't mention this at the time. I was distracted listening to Dan and Tom, but we also thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for the funding that went into running not only this conference, but each and individual session. Go ahead and take a break. We'll start up again at 3. And in this room, Dr. Nicole Bashir will be here about, she's a pediatrician who's going to talk about ways she would recommend us connecting with pediatricians and how to tailor our resources together. Room 2 will have Christina Burton from Russell County Public talking about cultivating employment opportunities for teens using teen advisory boards and actually some other ideas she has. In room 3 will be Steve Mosier, and he's from Dayton Metro Public Library, and he's going to talk about intellectual freedom, but ways that their library have worked together and come up with a way to create book sanctuaries. So stay tuned, and those 3 will start up in about 10 minutes.